Motion tweens are the most robust method of animating objects within Flash Professional. This lesson will have a look at how to create and manage this type of tween within the timeline. So here I have a blank document, and what we're going to do is create a movie clip symbol, and I'll simply create a circle. We'll position it wherever we like, and then go to Modify, Convert to Symbol, give it a name of ball, make sure it's a type of movie clip, and hit OK. So now we have this movie clip symbol instance on our stage, and we'll be able to animate it through motion tweening. Let's move over to frame 50, and what we're going to do is simply insert frames up to and including frame 50. Now we have 50 frames and only one keyframe with one object in here. If we want to create a motion tween, simply click anywhere in this frame span, and then right-click, and choose to create motion tween. Notice we could also create a classic tween here, but for a classic tween, you need multiple keyframes. For a motion tween, you don't. You only need one keyframe for a motion tween. Creating a shape tween is not an option here, it's grayed out, and the reason for that is because to create shape tweens, you need to use basic shapes and not movie clip symbol instances. So let's create a motion tween. Alright, so nothing much has changed here. You can see that we still have our keyframe and our instance, but the actual frames here are blue now. Blue signifies a motion tween. One other change is that we see this little icon change here in the layer, which designates this as a motion tween layer. Also, from the properties inspector, we can see that this frame is of type motion tween, and we can adjust some basic easing here. So basically easing in and out for any of our motion. We can also determine rotation, how many times to rotate the object, additional rotations, and the direction, whether clockwise or counterclockwise, and also whether we want to orient to a path. So let's have a look at what we can do through motion tweening. Say I want to have this object sort of loop up and down like a sine wave. It's very, very simple to do that using motion tweens. All I have to do is move the playhead to a different area and then move my object. We can see that there's a little path, a little motion guide that appears between my initial object property, my keyframe here, and where my playhead is right now. If I move this over a bit more and go down, we see the same thing happens. I can see the exact path that's being taken here. And then I'll complete it up there. So one of the really neat things about motion tweens is that you do see this sort of path that your object has taken from beginning to end. And as I move the playhead across the timeline, we can see the object actually move and follow that path. We have a great deal of control over these guides here as well. So I mentioned sine wave. That's not so much a sine wave, is it? Let's adjust that. To do that, with the selection tool, we can simply grab and shift any of these motion paths. To create something more like a sine wave. You'll also notice that we have these little special keyframes here. These keyframes are points designated on the timeline when we actually made some sort of major shift to our object's properties. To actually move these, we can select them. So perhaps I want to select this one right here, and then simply scrub back and forth. And you'll notice as I do this that the amount of points along this particular span right here actually diminishes. That's because each one of these represents a frame within the timeline. So let's move that back, and you can see how it all fits in. So maybe I want to expand this out to 50, and then reposition these so that they are equidistant. All right, and you'll notice it doesn't actually change the animation, it just evens everything out. So a lot of control with motion tweens. One of the major differences between motion tween and classic tween is that easing, initially in the properties inspector, if you're first using this, it doesn't seem like you have nearly as much control. But in fact, you can use the motion editor to have a great deal more control over the easing and properties of all of your objects using motion tween. The motion editor, by default, is accessed from within the timeline right here. So this has been an example of how to implement and use motion tweens within Flash Professional CS6.